Welcome everyone to the Kendall Report. Before we get into tonight's video, I want to talk to you about a couple things and make sure that you are signed up for my Substack newsletter. It comes out every day. You can go to kendallreport.com/newsletter. Just click on that link and that will get you to the newsletter. Also, those of you that have been complimenting me on some great calls, they're just market grid numbers and WaveTech Fibonacci targets that come from the indicator. So get those by going to kendallreport.com/indicators. All right, let's get into tonight's video. One of the things that just has been irritating me substantially, I've been very frustrated with everybody talking about what the debt is going to do. Everybody's talking about the debt is going to overcome the economy. We're not going to be able to pay off our debts. I mentioned this in the annual report, and I have a little different view of things. When I hear so much noise around the debt and everybody talking about how we're not going to be able to finance it, meanwhile, every treasury auction is 2.5 plus, usually around 2.9, almost 3 to 1 on what's being offered to what's being actually taken down. So there is plenty of money out there that still want U.S. treasuries. Everybody is in this mode of trying to come up with some kind of disaster story because we know that the doom scenario always plays out better for clickbait. This is a very interesting perspective I'm going to bring to you. I've told you folks on and on, if you want to be a good analyst, sometimes you have to take the opposite view of everybody that's out there. You can remember when everybody was talking about last year, the banking crisis that was going to unfold, and we're back to 2008, and none of that happened. I told you that's not going to happen. It's actually quite easy to fade these people. What we're hearing now is everybody talking about the debt. And they're even throwing some numbers, just looking at my notes. 2053, the debt will double based on its current trajectory as far as the growth is around 7.5% per year. Now, in Powell the other day in his 60 Minutes interview that he did, he talked about the debt is growing faster than GDP, and that's absolutely true at this moment. We're seeing GDP growth around 4.2, depending on when you measure it, year over year, looking at 23. And then you're looking at debt growing at 7.3 to 7.5, depending on how that's estimated. But those are fairly good numbers to keep track of. As many of you know, I'm a big proponent of AI. I believe that the AGI and the AI is one of the biggest events that have happened in human existence, and I think it's going to propel a lot of things forward. Now, I could do probably a multi-hour video on this, but I'm going to try to condense down to some very specific elements that I think are worth looking at. Now, one of the things that I made the assumption in my annual report, and that's available for free if you sign up for the Substack account, it was released on January 29th. There was something I talked about is the effects of productivity and GDP. And I'm going to throw some numbers out here in this video tonight so you can get a better handle on what these numbers actually mean. I have a graphic as well to show you what the potential is. Now, these are projections. They're not reality, but I believe we're going to see that type of reality. We're already seeing productivity increase into the 5% handle. I think we see 10, 12+% numbers. And also, this is the first year that AI is really starting to get effect in a lot of areas in the economy. I'm not going to go through the deep details. I am working on a document that I'm going to put out on the Substack. This is going to take a little bit to get done. I started working on it today. But let's talk about some of my expectations. And I think it's interesting because most folks don't have a clue on what this is likely to do as far as GDP growth. And as I've talked about before, productivity is the single biggest factor to multiply GDP. If we're going to see this multiplication factor kick up to these levels, I'm talking about 8, 12% plus, then you're going to see GDP kick up as well. There's a lot of factors that I can discuss that ultimately could be deflationary, that will be 25, 26. I don't want to sound like Kathy Wood on this, but there is a lot of deflationary pressures that are likely to come in as we get into somewhere around the end of 2025, maybe into 26. So let's stay centered back on this productivity gain that I'm looking at. So I did a lot of calculations here that I think you'll find very interesting, and I made some assumptions. Now, these are just assumptions, but I want you to understand if we get anywhere close to these numbers, there is going to be an explosion in GDP. And like I said, I could do a video just on the effects on employment. There's a lot of things that are going to be affected by what I'm talking about, but let's just look at the pure numbers as far as GDP goes and productivity and that multiplying factor. Here's the main point that I want to make, is I believe that folks are focused only on the debt. You see projections for debt out to 2053, but you don't see projections for GDP. What is it going to do? Nobody's forecasting growth. We're going to be at 180% of a GDP ratio by 2053 if things stay like they are. Otherwise, we have this outperformance of the debt growing faster than GDP. There are multiple ways to fix this. One, you cut down expenditures, which I would propose if you supporting different events around the world that may not be in the best interest, but if you pare those back by 50%, you get a big kick up in the expense side. Expenses are always important, but let's look at the potential for this growth pattern that I'm talking about. So the assumptions that I'm going to show you is basically that we're going to see GDP growth in 2025. This year of 2024 will be the peak in the ratio of GDP. So we look at 2025, and my assumption is that we're going to have productivity go up at 8%, and we're going to see the debt start to back off a little bit at around 5%. This is the assumption I made. I carried this assumption out to 2025, 26, and 28. What you'll see is the drastic effects on this ratio. As I mentioned earlier, no one's really paying attention or talking about what possible growth is there in the GDP across the planet. It's not just here in the U.S., but across the planet. And when you start to look at this and make some assumptions, you really get a much different picture. Now, I've always been an optimist. I'm going to be 72 years old this year, so I've been around a long time, but I'm listening to all of the talking heads. Ray Dalio talking about the 100-year debt cycle. You're looking at every economist, everybody's talking about this debt. And I'm telling you right now, that is important, but the way that we get out of this is through growth. And I believe the joke that I've been talking with some friends is that, is AI going to save the planet, and from a financial standpoint? And it's very likely that we're going to see these growth numbers. I think they're going to be fairly easy. Like I said, everybody's been talking about productivity has been much stronger than we thought it would be. Well, this is just seeing the glimpse of what's going to happen as AI gets more prevalent across the economic spectrum. Now, we're seeing like Cloudflare CEO was on Bloomberg talking about something where they took a job that took 8 hours down to 10 minutes. So you start adding those type of productivity gains across multiple industries, and you're going to see an explosion. Now, there's some really likely candidates for this. But medical, for one, financial, education, and even the legal field is going to be impacted. I think there'll be better AI attorneys than you can hire. Anybody that's had any experience with attorneys know, for the most part, a lot of them are pretty inept and don't do a very good job, but charge a lot of money. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of these numbers now, discuss them as we look at the chart. All right, so looking at this chart, what we're seeing here is you can see the peak that I was talking about. I'll put a cursor on this. The peak is at the end of this year, 2024. And then if we meet my 8% gain in productivity for 2025, and I'm actually projecting a 12% gain coming into 28, scaling up to that level, and only a 5% increase in debt growth. So we've got a big outperformance. You can see the green line is the GDP ratio, and you can see as we come into 26, all of a sudden it starts to cross well under 88%. It gets all the way down to about 80% as we come into 2028. And depending on what type of expenditures, what kind of things are going on in the economy, this is basically just projections and for conversation purposes. But I believe the probabilities of exceeding these numbers are more than just meeting them. I think that the productivity is going to go absolutely through the roof. I'm not sure. If you haven't seen the movie Wall-E, I'm not sure we're there yet, but we may get there where everybody has universal income. That's a joke. But what we're looking at here is this ratio just plummeting. And this is the opposite of what anybody is talking about out there. So let's go through a couple more things that I think that are worth mentioning. And like I said, I'm trying to keep this down to a minimal. I'm probably going to be doing a series on this because I think there's a lot to unpack here. Like I said, I'm writing an article on AI, the effects, putting this stuff that I'm talking about right now into a article that I think will be really helpful. That will be offered free. So once again, I'll tell you that you need to go to kendallreport.com/newsletter so you can get signed up there. Sign up for free if you want to just get some of this free information that I'll be putting out. I'm working on an article on ETF hacking. If you want the daily analysis, that's going to cost you $8 a month or $80 a year if you want the discount. As we go forward, I think there's going to be some amazing gains made. And everybody's arguing that I'm completely wrong here. I missed it. The economy, everything's going to come to an end, and that's going to be it. Ray Dalio's right. We're going to liquidate. We're going to go back to the Stone Age, all that. I've always been an optimist on people and the willingness for people to actually work hard to move humanity forward. And I think with society like where it is right now, I think we're at peak values everywhere. So I think we're going to see a whole reconstruction of how people think. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure you subscribe, like, and share these videos and hit that notification bell so you'll know the next time I do a video. Thanks again for spending the time with me. We'll talk to you soon.